The one thing that the Iraqis wanted was a signed document from the United States saying they have received Yassin in good health. The United States refused to sign that. The Iraqi government refused to turn him over. But to imply that somehow he was received by Baghdad as some sort of hero for trying to attack America is wrong. Now we'll talk about the other, Abu Nidal. Yes, he lived in a villa. Yes, he was not under house arrest. Why? Because the United States negotiated having Abu Nidal sent to Iraq as part of a deal with the PLO in the aftermath of his reign of terror. This is not Saddam Hussein saying, live here and function freely. This is America negotiating his release to Iraq, and the CIA knows this full well. So we can't talk about Saddam Hussein somehow being in bed with these terrorists, anti-American terrorists, prior to September 11th, nor can we talk about a link between Saddam Hussein and the forces of Osama bin Laden. Saddam Hussein, secular? Not totally, but nor is he a Wahhabist fundamentalist. In fact, if you take a look at Saddam Hussein's record as a dictator of Iraq, he declared war against Wahhabism, against Islamic fundamentalism. If you proselytize in the name of Wahhabism inside Saddam Hussein's dictatorship and were caught, you were given summary justice. This is why Fallujah is not only a hotbed of anti-Americanism today, it was a hotbed of anti-Saddamism during the 1990s. One reason why Saddam Hussein invoked the name of Allah on the flag as an effort to reestablish his legitimacy with a constituency that was losing faith in the secular nature of the Ba'athist regime. I'm not saying Saddam was a genuine Islamist, but he played that game very well. But to make the link between September 11th and Iraq is absurd in the extreme. And it's wrong, and it's morally wrong. I mean, this is what the President of the United States does every time he makes a speech. To this day, he gets up there and he invokes the horror of September 11th and then mentions Iraq as if Iraq was part of the global war on terror. You know, when we say global war on terror, what are we talking about? The United States has a definition of terrorism out there that basically precludes the United States as ever being defined as a practitioner of terror. But when you take a look at, when you speak of a nation that says the ends justify the means, and that's basically what we're saying here today. Forget all about how we got the war in Iraq. We got rid of Saddam Hussein, and that made it worth it. Ladies and gentlemen, I have to tell you right now, if you buy into the notion of the ends justify the means and you call yourself an American, throw your passport on the ground and get the hell out of my country. Because America is about the rule of law, due process. The ends don't justify the means justify the ends.
You know, Scott, it was interesting what you said when you talked about... No. Take it easy. We'll get to that. Wait, Scott, you talked about Saddam putting the paean of praise to Islam on the flag as a way of his restoring his credibility amongst the religious zealots of his country who were suspicious of him for his secularism. It's kind of like what liberal Democrats do here in the United States when they talk about their belief in God and faith, isn't it?
I'm not making that comparison.
Okay. All right, Christopher, if you'd like to respond with a parry to that last thrust,
the flag.
Then we'll go to the people.
By the way, I shouldn't have said it was a verse from the Quran. It is, in fact, Allahu Akbar. It's the invocation that's on the flag. It was put there after the war with Iran, which was a war considered by the Iranians to be religious, of course, but it was increasingly fought by Saddam as a religious war as well. I think, rather than tell you all about how when I met Abu Nidal, the CIA would neither have heard of him nor known where he was, and certainly didn't broker his presence in Baghdad, because it was before his reign of terror, which was being planned in Baghdad. When I met him, he wasn't even a known name. And again, I don't trust anything the agency says under this heading. And before I go on about the other suggestive comparisons, the way that Saddam Hussein was trying to build his own jihadist front, in other words, possibly even in rivalry as well as in some collusion with bin Laden. There were repeated meetings between al-Qaeda and Iraqi officials, well documented in Sudan. The pretext given by Mr. Richard Clarke, who you'll remember, for the bombing of Sudan was because Osama bin Laden was running a factory that was mixing the chemical weapons for the Iraqi Ba'ath Party. That was the official position of the Clinton administration that year. It's open to criticism. I criticized it myself. But there's every reason to think that in Sudan a big collusion was going on. I repeat, this is not about the last one, it's about the next one. Though I am, I must say, fascinated to find that Mr. Ritter is not convinced that the Taliban was the host government for Al-Qaeda, and I was rather amazed at the applause he got for that admittedly daring assertion. Perhaps the applause was for how daring it was.
That's not what I admitted at all. I acknowledge that the Taliban gave safe haven and succored Al-Qaeda.
For one thing, as for Mr. Yassin, the case is also opposite. Everyone, apart from the fact everyone in Baghdad was under house arrest at that time, it is well known and was documented by a visiting film crews. The man was on the loose. And to blame the United States government for not getting him back when Iraq is harboring someone who is just trying to make one tower of the World Trade Center collapse into the other, and to blame the technicalities of this extradition on the United States instead of the government that will not, I'll use the word, render this guy to us, is, I think, simply to blame the victim, which in this case is the United States. Poor old superpower that it is. It can be a victim too, all right? So, I mean, I'm sorry to say that everything Mr. Ritter just said was the most utter balls.
What was
and
it?
ignoring even the possibility, which has to be admitted, that there is why is Osama bin Laden's force all deployed? Why is it all deployed in defense of Saddam Hussein? Why does bin Laden issue his own fatwa saying, socialist though they are, our forces are entitled and, in fact, ordered to fight on their side against the main enemy? It's an announcement of cooperation. Why is the only outfit in Iraq that did any fighting against the coalition as it drove up to Baghdad, an enterprise in which Mr. Ritter didn't believe the possibility of? The only people who stood and fought were the Fedayeen Saddam, a special paramilitary state militia whose name tells you everything. The Fedayeen Saddam, a new force made up of Ba'ath Party thugs and imported foreign jihadists whose visa applications have since been found and documented, and many of them, when they say they want, why purpose of visit to Iraq, to join Fedayeen Saddam, make jihad.
Well,
sweet when they put it like that.
These were the people.
These were the people who were hoping to be the successive force. Everybody knew that the time of the Saddam regime was limited. He was losing his mind. His sons were probably quarreling among themselves. The regime was imploding and collapsing. Neighboring countries were casting covetous eyes. If we hadn't invaded, it would have been Turkey, Iran, and Saudi Arabia that had invaded on behalf of their proxies. There would have been a terrible religious and civil and confessional war. The people who were bidding to come out on top in this new Afghanistan, this new combination of rogue state and failed state, was going to be the Ba'athist, bin Ladenist mutation, Fedayeen Saddam, that's now fully rebaptized and rebranded as Al-Qaeda in Mesopotamia. It is absolutely idle to overlook this connection. And in fact, it deserves a great deal more scrutiny and a great deal more disclosure from our incompetent intelligence services than it has received.
Well, Christopher, whatever they're called, Fedayeen Saddam or whatever, can you really, A, fault them, or B, link them to Osama bin Laden because they're fighting back when people land and invade their country?
It wasn't their country, my dear. The Fedayeen Saddam is an international brigade of jihadists mustered by Ba'athist secret policemen. You want to identify this with Iraqi patriotism? Your problem.
Another question, and then we're going to get to the people's questions. Is it possible? All right already. Is it possible, since the United States has finite resources in terms of soldiers, men, material, intelligence resources, etc., that by diverting it all to Iraq, making that the triage priority, that we are overlooking the greater global war on terrorism against international jihadism, which many people would agree is a problem and a threat?
Let's admit the possibility, but let's notice that the international jihadists appear to have decided that Iraq is the place where the issue between us has been joined.
Scott,
and if they want to be taken up on it, I think that they should, since the alternative is leaving Iraq to them, and I would describe that in one word as unthinkable.
Scott,
the jihadists will never have Iraq.
Rejoinder for that before these people are getting restless.
Well, I would just make,
All right, all right, all right.
I would share the observation that I too am perplexed by Zarqawi's sudden transformation from third-rate Jordanian